What if everything you thought you knew about a legendary story was wrong? The tale of the so-called Unkillable B-17, painted like a cow, is one of World War II's most enduring and viral legends. A story of a simple mechanic, a ridiculous idea, and a bomber that cheated death time and again. It's a narrative of ingenuity against the odds. But what is the truth? Declassified records, long buried in archives, tell a different story. A story not of paint and superstition, but of engineering, statistics, and the brutal, unrelenting mathematics of aerial warfare over occupied Europe. This is not a myth. This is a revelation. Our story centers not on a single bomber, but on the collective experience of the United States 8th Air Force, stationed across the windswept airfields of eastern England in the grim autumn of 1943. The target, the very heart of the German war machine. The weapon, the Boeing B-17F Flying Fortress, a symbol of American industrial might, equipped with 11.50 caliber machine guns and a bomb bay capable of carrying up to 8,000 pounds of destruction. Among the many groups of the 1st Bombardment Division was the 91st Bomb Group, based at RAF Bassingbourn. Within the 91st, the 324th Bomb Squadron flew missions into the teeth of the Reich's defenses. And it is here we find our aircraft, B-17F-10BO, serial number 41 to 24,485, a machine that would later become infamous. Her assigned crew, under the command of a young pilot, co-pilot, and 8 other men, were not yet legends. They were simply airmen, facing a daily attrition rate that chilled the blood. By late 1943, the average life expectancy of a B-17 crew in the 8th Air Force was a mere 15 missions. The command had set 25 missions as the tour completion requirement, a number that seemed a distant, almost impossible dream. The Luftwaffe's fighter pilots were experienced, aggressive, and equipped with deadly machines like the Focke-Wulf FW-190. The flak over targets was a black, blossoming forest of steel that tore aircraft apart. This was the strategic reality, a war of attrition where survival was not about magic, but about millimeters, seconds, and sheer dumb luck. 41 to 24,485 flew her first combat mission on November 26, 1943 to Bremen. She returned, like hundreds of others, bearing the scars of battle, flak holes in her aluminum skin, patches hastily applied by ground crews working through the freezing English night. Mission followed brutal mission, to Zollingen, to Emden, to the dreaded synthetic oil refineries at Ludwigshafen. With each flight, her logbook grew thicker with entries, her fuselage accumulating a patchwork of repairs. Standard procedure was to dab fresh olive drab paint over repaired sections. But for the overworked ground crews of the 324th, keeping up with the relentless damage was a losing battle. Aircraft returned with gashes, tears, and holes of all sizes, each requiring a sheet of aluminum, rivets, and paint. By her 18th mission in January 1944, the appearance of 41 to 24,485 had begun to change. She was no longer a uniform shade of olive drab. Instead, she was a quilt. A mosaic of original factory paint, fresh olive drab patches, and the bare zinc chromate primer that was applied under the skin, now exposed to the elements where flak had torn the outer layers away. This primer was a light, yellowish-green color. From a distance, and especially in the variable light over Europe, this patchwork created a bizarre, disruptive pattern. To a weary crew chief with a dark sense of humor, or perhaps to a pilot looking for a morale boost, the pattern suggested something familiar, the irregular black and white spots of a dairy cow. The name was Born the Cow. It was unofficial, painted not by a grand design, but by the relentless hammer of German anti-aircraft artillery. And as the cow kept returning, from Bremen, from Munster, from Berlin, while other, cleaner fortresses fell from the sky, the whispers began. Superstition, always a soldier's companion, took hold. Men began to nod toward the patched, piebald bomber. They said the German gunners couldn't get a fix on her. They said her bizarre appearance confused fighter pilots. The myth was born, not from fact, but from the desperate human need to find pattern, reason, and hope in the random chaos of death from above. By February 1944, the cow had completed 22 missions. She was an outlier, a statistical anomaly. And with only 3 missions to go for her crew to complete their tour, the tension was palpable. Would the legend hold? The mission briefing on the morning of February 25, 1944, confirmed the worst fears of the veteran airmen. The target, the ball-bearing factories at Stuttgart, Deep in southern Germany, a long, arduous flight that would stretch their fuel to the limits and keep them over hostile territory for hours. It was a maximum-effort mission. The skies were predicted to be thick with cloud, promising a treacherous formation flight and perfect ambush conditions for the Luftwaffe. The cow, now a familiar sight on the flight line, rumbled down the runway at Bassingbourn, her four Wright Cyclone engines straining under a full load of fuel and bombs. Her crew, led by Pilot Lieutenant John G. Henderson, was tense. This was Mission 23. Just two more after this. The patchwork fuselage, their talisman, seemed less a charm and more a target in the pale morning light. The mission unfolded as a nightmare. Dense cloud cover broke up the combat boxes, scattering the fortresses. Over the target, the flak was inaccurate due to the clouds, but the real threat emerged on the long flight home. Disorganized and strung out, the B-17s were perfect prey. From sunward positions, the Luftwaffe struck. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s of Jägerschwader 26 and 27 fell upon the scattered formations in waves of cannon and machine gun fire. The cow found herself isolated, a lone bomber struggling to stay in the vicinity of a diminished formation. At 1,347 hours, just east of the French border, the attack came. A pair of FW-190s, flying a textbook high-side attack, screamed down. The gunners aboard the cow shouted warnings, their .50 calibers hammering, filling the freezing air with the smell of cordite. Tracer fire lanced past the wings. Then, the impact. 20mm cannon shells, designed to destroy aircraft, ripped into the fortress. One shell exploded in the radio compartment, shattering equipment and wounding the radio operator. Another tore through the left side of the fuselage near the waist gunner's position, sending shrapnel flying. A third struck the number 2 engine, which immediately began to stream thick, black smoke and lose oil pressure. The intercom filled with panicked calls. The aircraft yawed violently as the pilot fought to control it on 3 engines. The acrid stench of burned insulation, hydraulic fluid, and blood filled the cabin. The temperature, already minus 40 degrees Celsius at altitude, plummeted further as the torn fuselage let in the screaming wind. The cow was wounded, bleeding altitude and hope. The myth of the unkillable bomber was being dismantled, shell by shell, over the snowy forests of France. The fighters, seeing the crippled state of the bomber, circled for the kill. What happened next had nothing to do with pain. It was a testament to training, resilience, and the rugged design of the B-17 itself. In the cockpit, Lieutenant Henderson and his co-pilot performed the emergency drill for a failed engine. Feather the propeller. Cut fuel. Fire extinguisher. Their movements, practiced 100 times on the ground, were now a ballet of survival. The flight engineer worked frantically to manage the dying engine systems. In the shattered radio room, the wounded operator, ignoring his own injuries, managed to send out a faint SOS and a rough position fix. But the true turning point came from the very thing that made the 8th Air Force's strategy so costly and yet so ultimately effective: formation flying. Through the broken clouds, the pilot of another wounded B-17 from the 401st Bomb Group, the Duchess, saw the cow's desperate plight. His own aircraft was damaged, but still flyable. In an act of incredible airmanship and courage, he maneuvered his own fortress closer, bringing his undamaged array of guns to bear. The arrival of the Duchess was a psychological and tactical thunderclap. Her gunners opened a furious barrage on the circling FW-190s, who now found themselves facing defensive fire from a new angle. This unexpected resistance broke the fighters' attack pattern. Low on fuel and ammunition themselves, and wary of the renewed defensive crossfire, the German pilots broke off. The cow was granted a reprieve, not by her spots, but by the sacrifice and skill of a fellow crew. Yet the crisis was far from over. The cow was still 250 miles from the English Channel, losing altitude, with a wounded man aboard and structural damage. Henderson made the only decision he could, would never make it back to Bassingbourn. He pointed the nose toward the nearest Allied territory, the emergency landing fields on the southeastern coast of England. For over an hour, the stricken fortress droned on, descending slowly, the crew jettisoning everything they could to lighten her: ammunition, damaged equipment. Even the prized Norden bomb site was secured for a crash landing. The icy channel waters passed beneath them. Then the white cliffs of Dover. Relief was short-lived. They were not safe yet. With a dead engine, failing hydraulics, and shuddering airframe, Henderson guided the cow toward the emergency field at RAF Manston, a field renowned for its long runways and expert crash crews. The landing gear, damaged in the fight, lowered unevenly. The tires were shot. The runway at Manston stretched out before them, a gray ribbon of hope. The wheels touched down in a shower of sparks. The damaged gear collapsed on the left side. The B-17, her momentum carrying her forward, ground-looped violently, tearing off the left wing and spinning around in a screeching, grinding whirl of tearing metal. She slid to a final dusty halt just yards from the runway's end. The crash trucks were already racing toward her. One by one, the shaken but alive crew emerged from the shattered fuselage. The wounded radio operator was carefully extracted and rushed to the station hospital. Miraculously, there were no fatalities. The cow had brought them home one last time, but her war was over. The damage was beyond economical repair. She was classified as Category I write-off. This is where the declassified records, the missing aircrew reports, the squadron diaries, and the repair depot forms sever the myth from reality. 41 to 24,485, the cow did not complete 50 missions. She did not become an unkillable legend of the skies. Her final tally was 23 combat missions, too short of her cruise to her completion. Her survival was a product of the same factors that saved or doomed every B-17. The skill of her pilots, the accuracy of her gunners, the durability of her design, the intervention of fellow airmen, and a significant measure of luck. Her patchwork appearance was a result of her survival, not the cause of it. She survived long enough to become patchwork. The legend of the unkillable cow-painted B-17 is a composite, a folktale that conflates the story of 41 to 24,485 with other high-mission aircraft that did sport intentional and sometimes garish paint schemes for identification or morale. It is a powerful story because it speaks to our desire for a simple, visible secret to survival in the chaos of war. The declassified truth is more profound. It reveals that survival in the skies over Europe was a complex, brutal equation with no single variable. The real heroes were not the patches of paint, but the men who flew the damaged machine home, and the men on the ground who kept patching her up until the odds finally, inevitably, ran out. The story of the cow is not one of mythical invincibility, but of human tenacity in the face of a relentless mechanical war. It is a testament to the men of the 91st Bomb Group and the entire Mighty 8th, who faced astronomical odds with courage that no legend can fully capture. Their legacy is written not in folklore, but in the pages of mission reports and in the peace their sacrifice helped to secure. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to Historic War Records as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.